Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Glor. You're watching CBSN, and we are getting some new pictures in of the scene in Ferguson, Missouri, as we await the announcement of what a grand jury has decided in the shooting death of Michael Brown with regard to police officer Darren Wilson. The announcement will be made at 9 Eastern. It's a 12-member panel. They've been considering whether to indict Wilson, and here's what we know about that panel right now. Jurors have been deciding whether Wilson should be charged with any number of crimes: first-degree murder, second-degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, or involuntary manslaughter. That's a picture from where the announcement will be made. The grand jury can issue an indictment on any of those four charges we just mentioned. It can also add a charge of armed criminal action. The jury can also decide not to indict at all. Unlike a jury in a criminal case, which convicts someone if jurors are convinced of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, a grand jury decides whether there is probable cause to charge someone. And in Missouri, only 9 of those jurors on the grand jury have to vote to recommend a charge. We have a team of legal analysts here this evening prepared to take a look at what the jury has decided. Vladimir Dudier is standing by with them. Vlad?
Hey, Jeff. Yes, you're right. We have a team of experts here from John Jay Criminal College, College of Criminal Justice. I want to introduce them all before we get started. John DeCarlo is Associate Professor, the Department of Law. He's going to be looking at the police activity and the rights that police officers have vis-a-vis the rights of the citizens protesting. Dr. Lawrence Klobinski, he is the Professor of Forensic Science. We've spoken to him many times in the past about the autopsy that was conducted on Michael Brown. Over to his left, Gloria Brown Marshall. She's a professor and a lawyer. She is the author of a book, Race, Law in American Society, so that gives you a sense of where we're going to be approaching her when we come to her. And always our own Ebony Williams, who is a CBS correspondent and a lawyer, legal analyst. We're going to be talking to them. In addition to that, Jeff, we also have the CBS Investigative Unit.
We've been waiting for this decision now for 3 months as the grand jury has considered their decision. We're going to go to Scott Pelley now.
Right now, we are about to hear the grand jury decision in the fatal shooting of Michael Brown by Ferguson, Missouri police officer Darren Wilson. For the past 3 months, 12 St. Louis County grand jurors have been hearing evidence in the case. Wilson shot Brown, who was 18 years old and unarmed, during a confrontation on a Ferguson street. Wilson says there was a struggle over the officer's gun, and he feared for his life. The grand jury is deciding whether Officer Wilson should be charged with a crime.
The duty of the grand jury is to separate fact from fiction. After their exhaustive review of the evidence, the grand jury deliberated over 2 days, making their final decision.
I want to send it over to Vladimir Dudier. He's with a panel of legal experts we put together here with some analysis this evening. Vlad?
I'm here with Rashid, who's part of the CBS Investigative Unit. We are just now receiving pictures from the county prosecutor's office. These are pictures of Darren Wilson that were taken. He's going to scroll through them, and you can see from the pictures that we're looking at here, we don't see any injuries. It looks like there's some slight bruising on his right cheek there, but let me have Rashid just scroll through these photos. It's the back of his neck. There looks to be some kind of bruising there. Again, Jeff, you recall that part of the testimony was that Officer Wilson and Michael Brown engaged in some kind of violent struggle within his vehicle. There were reports that Officer Wilson had his eyes, one of his eyes, damaged during that struggle.
All right, Vlad, and all these documents that they said they would release, they are now releasing, and we're starting to get these in, and we're trying to go through these as quickly as we can. As we took a look at those pictures of Darren Wilson's face, one of the main issues here was not just his face, but also his hands and the struggle that may or may not have gone on regarding the gun. Lawrence Koblinski, I wonder if you can talk about that for a moment and what information you're hoping to get from these documents.
I think Dr. Bodden will agree that there were no shots to Michael Brown's back. And I think that's very important because some of the eyewitnesses indicated that Michael Brown was shot in the back. So I think that you have to factor in Michael Bodden's autopsy with the St. Louis Medical Examiner's autopsy, taken together with all of the other evidence, the gunshot residue evidence, the ballistics findings, how many shots were fired, the position, the trajectory. And I think all of this is coming out, starting to come out now, to help us better understand why the grand jury reached the decision that they did.
All right, Lawrence Kobylensky from John Jay College, thank you very much. Ricky, what are you looking for in these documents right now?
Well, I'm listening to Dr. Kobylensky, and we really do understand that Michael Brown was certainly struck a number of times, but he was never struck in the back. And according to the prosecutor said there were all kinds of witnesses who said that they not only saw him struck in the back, they saw Officer Wilson shooting at him when he was down in the back, and on it went until evidence came out that he wasn't struck in the back, and then those witnesses changed their testimony. The reality is the reality. There is evidence within that car that supports a scenario that may or may not be matched by the oral testimony of witnesses. The physical evidence will tell the truth, not necessarily the witnesses.
Now, John, let me turn to you for a moment. We are watching pictures now of some of the protesters that are gathering in anticipation of this decision. You have done a lot of research into how police departments interact with the community. What have you seen over the last couple of months? What struck you about what you've seen in Ferguson?
Vlad, the response in Ferguson from the very beginning was extraordinary in the fact that it was very militaristic as opposed to some of the other options that the police could have taken there. Of course, not having been there myself, it's hard to second guess. However, it did seem that it reflected a newer culture of law enforcement rather than policing, in which the police acted in a much harsher way with the community than could have been.
Define for us what you mean by law enforcement versus policing. We were talking a little bit about that earlier. It's a very interesting concept, or an idea that you posited to us.
We did some studying of the way cops and the public view police officers over the last 30 years, and what we found is that there is a cultural change in the way that especially police officers view themselves. We have seen the rise of a warrior culture in policing as opposed to a caretaker culture, and that has caused differences in perception in how police view the community and the community view the police.
Jeff, you had a question for our panel.
Yeah, Vlad, Gloria may be the best one to answer this question, but our understanding is that the prosecutor in this case did not make a recommendation to the grand jury. How unusual is that, and how surprised by that is she?
I think it's quite unusual. Prosecutors usually are advocating for an indictment, and there's a phrase that goes that you can possibly indict a ham sandwich if you really want to. And so to have this prosecutor say hands off, I'm just going to let you ferret through the evidence and then decide what you think is the best line to take, is something that prosecutors normally do not do. They want an indictment. They are really preparing for a trial. And they're thinking, if they're going to take it this far to a grand jury, that in their mind's eye, this is just one step toward the trial. So for this particular prosecutor, and we know there's a history, a controversial history. His father was a police officer. His father was killed by a black man. And so the community said yes, but that was not Michael Brown.
Right. So Gloria, if you're in that grand jury, then what kind of position does that put you in? You're not a legal expert at all, and you're getting no guidance from a prosecutor.
I think I really feel for these people, because, you know, the jury is not sequestered. The community knows the names. They know who these people are. Either way they lose, someone's going to be very unhappy. And so to be given all this information and even have Darren Wilson testify, that was interesting.
That was very interesting.
Yes, that he testified, he gave up his Fifth Amendment right. As far as we know, he testified based on the questions that jury would ask. To your point, you would think, but those jurors may not ask the right questions. He's not being cross-examined by someone who's a legal professional. So he could give his best story, but that doesn't necessarily mean it falls in line with what is legally supposed to be supported. As, for example, the self-defense issue made, right. he might give his testimony in a way that it sounds like self-defense, but does the juror know that self-defense is not the issue on the table right now? Right. So I think it's going to be very difficult for those jurors to ferret through all that information, all that testimony, the emotions, the pressure, to hear people talking without any guidance.
Shortly after the decision was announced not to charge Officer Darren Wilson tonight, President Obama addressed the nation. He reiterated that protesters must remain calm and peaceful. Here's a little bit of what the president said.
First and foremost, we are a nation built on the rule of law. And so we need to accept that this decision was the grand jury's to make. There are Americans who agree with it, and there are Americans who are deeply disappointed, even angry. It's an understandable reaction. But I join Michael's parents in asking anyone who protests this decision to do so peacefully.
I'm Jeff Glor. You're watching CBSN Live. We're back right after this.